Welcome back, everyone, to Business Leaders Cyber Briefing. Today, we're going to do something a little different, a deep dive into a new report from Coolwater Cyber, specifically for the construction industry.
Oh, this is going to be good.
It is called, it's all, oh, our listeners got something to share. Let's hear it.
Yeah, hi Tom. Hey, Trish. Sorry to interrupt. So my name is Mark. I'm from Coolwater Cyber, and I'm the author of the report. So as you get into the detail, feel free to ask me any questions as we go along. I'm delighted to be here.
Mark, that is fantastic.
Oh, Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
We are honored to have you.
Yeah, this is great.
We might just put you in the hot seat.
Exactly. Okay, so you wrote this report.
What inspired you to focus on construction?
Right, because this is very specific.
And timely, of course.
Yeah, so in terms of focusing on construction, it's a sector I've been working in for a number of years. And I was really kind of thinking about the evolution of safety culture, which we'll go through as we go into the report. And it was really inspired by a project I worked on recently, which is the A303 Stonehenge Bypass Tunnel, which is a big £2 billion critical national infrastructure project. I was responsible for cybersecurity as the CISO on the project. And I was working with other team members about this whole concept of safety in construction and how could we develop this holistic approach. So rather than talk about physical safety or mental safety or cyber safety, actually it's all just safety, and that's what we were doing and pioneering on that project. So when we get to that part of the report, we can dive into more detail if you like.
That's awesome, Mark.
I think that's where it gets really interesting.
All right, so let's do that.
Yeah, and I think for the audience, it's important to know that, this isn't just for people in, hard hats out on job sites.
Right.
This is for business leaders, anyone who really cares about the bottom line in construction.
Exactly. It all ties back to, keeping projects on track and, of course, protecting your people.
Absolutely.
So in this deep dive, we're going to look at how safety has evolved.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about the, kind of the elephant in the room, the mental health crisis that's hitting construction pretty hard.
Yeah, it's a big one.
And then the part I think a lot of our listeners will be really interested in is how does cybersecurity fit into all of this?
I think that's where it gets really interesting because you start to see those connections between physical safety, mental well-being, and then the cyber world.
Right. So whether you're, a CEO trying to keep your company profitable or you're an IT manager trying to keep the hackers out, this report has something for you.
Definitely does.
So to kick things off, this report does a great job of kind of setting the stage with a historical overview of just how dangerous construction used to be.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking when you look back. I mean, they opened the report with this comparison to the Battle of Waterloo.
Really?
Yeah. So back in the 1840s, they were building this tunnel, the Woodhead Tunnel, and the death rate for the workers was actually higher than for the soldiers at Waterloo.
Wow, I had no idea.
32 workers died during the construction, and then another 28 family members died from cholera because the living conditions were so bad.
That's awful. It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. We've come a long way, but it also shows that we can't get complacent.
Absolutely. So the report then kind of jumps ahead to the 1970s and talks about the Health and Safety at Work Act as this major turning point.
Right. So before that, it was all kind of piecemeal, different rules and regulations depending on where you were working, what you were doing.
So it was a bit of a mess.
It really was. But this act in 1974, it kind of changed everything. It moved to this more proactive approach where employers were really responsible for safety.
So it wasn't just about reacting to accidents after they happen. It was about preventing them in the first place.
Exactly. And you can see the results. I mean, the UK has actually done a really good job. The fatality rate in construction has gone down dramatically since the 70s.
That's encouraging to hear, but it sounds like it wasn't just about new laws. It was about a change in mindset, too.
Absolutely. The report talks about this shift from just following the rules to actually building a true safety culture.
So what does that mean exactly?
Well, it's about going beyond just ticking boxes on a checklist. It's about making safety part of your company's DNA.
So it's about values, not just rules.
Exactly. Everyone from the CEO to the newest hire needs to understand that safety is paramount.
It's like that see something, say something campaign we've seen in other industries, right?
Yeah, that's a great example. The report actually highlights a case study with ACCO brands.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
They implemented this system where any employee, even the most junior person, could flag a safety concern directly to senior management.
So there was no fear of retribution, no going through layers of bureaucracy.
Right. It created this sense of psychological safety where everyone felt comfortable speaking up.
And that's crucial because it's not just about physical safety anymore, is it?
No, it's not.
This report really shines a light on the mental health crisis that's affecting construction.
And the numbers are really alarming. 1 in 5 UK construction workers have been injured because of poor mental health.
Wow, where did you see that stat?
It's from a QBE study they did a while back. And then there's that other really sobering statistic that construction workers in the UK are 3.7 times more likely to die by suicide than the average person.
That's just heartbreaking.
It is. And there's this campaign, Help Inside the Hard Hat. Their message is that 2 construction workers take their own lives every single working day.
It's a stark reminder that this isn't just a personal issue. This is a safety issue that affects everyone in the industry.
Absolutely. And, we have to think about why this is happening. The stress, the depression, the anxiety, all of that can make it really hard for someone to focus.
And on a construction site, that can be incredibly dangerous.
Exactly. One wrong move, one lapse in judgment could have devastating consequences.
It makes you realize how closely linked physical safety and mental well-being really are.
They're two sides of the same coin, and I think for a lot of business leaders, this is a real wake-up call.
Absolutely.
But the good news is that there are some really positive initiatives out there to address this.
Like, what have you seen?
Well, there are organizations like Mates in Mind that are doing great work in raising awareness and providing support. We're also seeing more companies offering mental health first aid training and having these toolbox talks that specifically focus on mental well-being.
So it's starting to become part of the conversation.
It is, and more companies are offering employee assistance programs as well, which is a good step.
Yeah, it's definitely a move in the right direction.
But there's still a lot more work to do.
Okay, so we've talked about how traditional safety has evolved, how mental well-being is now a critical part of the equation. But the big question is, where does cybersecurity fit into all of this?
That's right. And this is where the report gets really interesting, especially for our listeners who are in the IT and cybersecurity world.
Yeah, I mean, is this really a safety issue?
Well, think about it. We're now in an era where construction sites are using more and more technology, BIM, IoT, cloud-based platforms, you name it.
And all of that creates new points of vulnerability.
Exactly. And those vulnerabilities can be exploited by cyber criminals.
So you're saying that a cyber attack isn't just about stealing data anymore. It could actually lead to physical harm on a job site.
Precisely. Imagine a hacker gaining access to the controls of a crane or disrupting communications during a critical operation. The consequences could be catastrophic.
Yeah, suddenly cybersecurity doesn't seem so abstract and irrelevant, does it?
Not at all. And here's the thing. Most cyber breaches are caused by human error.
Really?
Yeah, the UK's Information Commissioner's Office says that 90% of breaches are the result of someone clicking on a phishing link using a weak password or downloading malware.
So even if you have all the latest security technology, if your employees aren't trained properly, you're still at risk.
It's like having the best safety harness in the world, but not knowing how to use it.
Right. You're only as strong as your weakest link.
Exactly. And that's why this report argues that we need to start treating cybersecurity with the same level of importance as physical safety and mental well-being.
So instead of seeing these as separate issues, we need to start thinking about them as all part of one big safety umbrella.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture where everyone understands that their actions both online and offline have a direct impact on safety.
And this is where things start to get really interesting.
It is.
So we'll be diving into that in much more detail after the break. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Business Leaders Cyber Briefing. So before the break, we were talking about how cybersecurity is becoming this really critical part of safety in construction. Like, it's not just about protecting data anymore.
Right. It's about preventing these potentially really serious incidents, things that could actually put lives at risk on job sites.
Exactly. And this report from Coolwater Cyber, they actually walk through some specific examples of how this works in practice. Like you mentioned earlier, they implemented this whole integrated safety approach on the A303 Stonehenge bypass project.
Yeah, that was a really fascinating case study. Instead of having all these separate safety moments for physical safety and then mental well-being and then cybersecurity, they decided to combine them all together into one program.
So like during their toolbox talks, they would address all three aspects at the same time. Exactly. And it was really effective because it kept reinforcing this idea that it's all connected. You can't separate physical safety from mental well-being from cybersecurity.
So it's like a constant reminder that cybersecurity is just as important as wearing your hard hat or, looking out for your colleagues' mental health.
Exactly. And it really helped to break down those silos. It got everyone thinking about safety in this more holistic way.
That makes a lot of sense. But I think for a lot of our listeners, the question is, okay, this all sounds great in theory, but how do we actually put this into practice?
Yeah.
What are the practical steps that business leaders and IT managers can take to create this kind of integrated safety culture within their own organizations?
Well, the report actually offers a ton of really practical advice, and I think one of the most important things they emphasize is the need for leadership buy-in.
So this can't just be something that's delegated to the safety manager or the IT department. This has to come from the top.
Absolutely. The message has to be clear from the CEO and other senior leaders that safety in all its forms is a top priority for the organization.
So it's not just about talking the talk, it's about walking the walk.
Exactly. Leaders need to be role models when it comes to safe practices, and that includes cybersecurity.
Right.
Are they using strong passwords? Are they careful about what they click on in emails? Are they reporting any suspicious activity?
So it's about setting the tone, leading by example.
And that example needs to be consistent across the board.
Okay, so leadership buy-in is crucial, but what else?
The report also talks about the need for unified governance when it comes to safety.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Well, they recommend establishing a cross-functional safety committee that brings together representatives from different departments, operations, HR, IT, legal, and, of course, safety.
So instead of having all these separate silos, you're creating a central hub where all aspects of safety are considered together.
Exactly. This committee would be responsible for developing a holistic safety strategy, setting policies, allocating resources, and monitoring performance.
And that makes a lot of sense because by having everyone at the table, you can start to see those connections, identify potential overlaps or conflicts, and make sure that all aspects of safety are being addressed in this really coordinated way.
Absolutely. For example, let's say you're introducing a new digital tool on a construction site. The safety committee can assess not only the physical safety risks, but also the potential cybersecurity vulnerabilities and even the impact on workers' mental health.
Right, because it's all connected. And this integrated approach can also help to improve communication and collaboration across different departments. When everyone is speaking the same language and working toward the same goals, it just makes for a much more cohesive and supportive workplace culture.
And absolutely. And it's not just about committees and policies. The report also highlights the importance of training and awareness campaigns that really target all levels of the organization.
So you're talking about going beyond the traditional, hard hat and safety vest training and incorporating modules on mental well-being and cybersecurity.
Exactly. And those training programs need to be tailored to different roles and responsibilities within the organization. A site foreman might need more in-depth training on how to identify and report physical hazards, while an office worker might need more training on cybersecurity best practices.
But I think just like with physical safety, you need to make sure that employees understand the why behind the rules and procedures.
Absolutely. It's not just about ticking boxes and following rules blindly. It's about empowering employees to make informed decisions, decisions that protect themselves, their colleagues, and the organization as a whole.
This report is really full of practical advice, isn't it? They really seem to have thought of everything.
They really have. And one of the things that stood out to me was their emphasis on the need for integrated reporting systems.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean by that?
So instead of having separate reporting mechanisms for physical safety incidents, mental health concerns, and cyber threats, they suggest having a single centralized system where employees can report any type of safety issue.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It just simplifies things for employees. And it sends this really clear message that the organization takes all types of safety concerns seriously.
Exactly. And on the back end, that integrated data can be incredibly valuable for the organization. You can start to see patterns and trends, identify areas of weakness, and develop more targeted interventions.
So, for example, if you're seeing a spike in reports of near-miss accidents during a particularly busy period, it might indicate that workers are feeling stressed and overworked, which could then lead to more serious incidents down the line.
Exactly. Having all that data in one place allows you to connect those dots and address the root causes of safety issues, whether they're physical, mental, or cyber.
This integrated approach to data analysis could be a real game changer for the construction industry. It's about moving beyond reactive measures and getting ahead of the curve when it comes to safety.
Absolutely. And it's not just about internal data. The report also talks about collaborating with external partners, subcontractors, suppliers, vendors.
Right, because if there's a weak link in the supply chain, it can compromise the safety of the entire project.
Exactly. And that includes cybersecurity. You need to make sure that your partners are adhering to the same high standards as you are.
So that might mean including cybersecurity requirements in contracts with vendors and conducting regular audits of digital tools that are being used on construction sites.
Exactly. And it's also about sharing best practices and learning from each other. The construction industry is a collaborative one, and we need to work together to create a safer and more secure environment for everyone.
Well, this report has certainly given us a lot to think about. It's clear that the traditional boundaries of safety are blurring, and we really need to embrace this new, more holistic approach.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of organizations, this is going to be a significant shift, but the benefits are clear.
Yeah, it's about creating a workplace where everyone feels safe, supported, and valued.
Exactly. And that's something we're striving for.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive into the future of safety in construction. I want to thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insights.
It's been a pleasure.
And for our listeners, be sure to check out the full Cool Water Cyber Report. There's so much valuable information in there. And if you're looking for help with implementing these ideas, reach out to Cool Water Cyber. They're the experts.
They really are.
All right, everyone, thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Business Leaders Cyber Briefing. Until then, stay safe out there. Welcome back to Business Leaders Cyber Briefing. We've spent this episode really digging into this Cool Water Cyber Report and their argument that safety in construction, it's not just about, hard hats and high-vis vests anymore.
Right. It's about recognizing that the mental well-being of your workers, that's a safety issue too. And now they're saying cybersecurity, that needs to be part of the equation as well.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, but we've seen how beneficial this kind of integrated approach can be. But, as with any big change, there are going to be some challenges, some roadblocks along the way.
Absolutely. The report doesn't shy away from that at all.
So for our listeners out there, those business leaders and IT managers, what are some of the hurdles that they should be prepared for?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is going to be expertise. Physical safety, mental health, cybersecurity, these are all specialized fields.
Right. You might have a fantastic safety manager who knows everything about fall protection, but they might not know the first thing about a phishing attack or how to secure a network.
Exactly. And you can't expect everyone to become an expert overnight.
So are you saying we need to hire a whole new team of experts?
Not necessarily. It's more about recognizing where those gaps in knowledge are and finding ways to fill them.
So maybe that means providing training for existing staff, bringing in consultants for specific projects, partnering with organizations that specialize in these areas.
Exactly. There are a lot of different options, but the key is to be proactive about it.
Don't just assume that everyone will figure it out on their own.
Right. And this is where that unified governance structure we talked about earlier, that becomes so important.
That cross-functional safety committee.
Exactly. They could play a really key role in assessing the organization's capabilities, identifying those areas where they need to improve, and coming up with a plan to get that expertise.
Okay, so expertise is one challenge. What else?
Another potential pitfall is that, one area might overshadow another. Let's say a company has just had a major data breach.
Everyone freaks out and suddenly cybersecurity is all anyone can talk about.
Exactly. And maybe they start neglecting those traditional safety practices. Or on the flip side, you have a company with this really strong physical safety culture, and they might underestimate the importance of mental well-being or cyber threats.
So it's about finding that balance.
It is. You need to make sure that you're giving adequate attention to all three aspects of safety all the time.
It's like a three-legged stool. If one leg is weak, the whole thing collapses.
Exactly. A great analogy.
But how do you do that in practice? How do you make sure that you're covering all the bases without overwhelming people?
Well, the report talks about clear and concise communication. You don't want to bombard people with information.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between keeping people informed and engaged without, making their eyes glaze over.
Exactly. And you need to tailor your message to the audience.
Yeah.
Don't use a bunch of technical jargon with people who aren't going to understand it.
Right. Keep it simple, keep it relevant, and most importantly, keep it positive.
Absolutely. Especially when we're talking about mental health. You don't want to create a culture of fear or blame.
It's about building trust, right? Making sure that people feel comfortable speaking up about their concerns and asking for help when they need it.
Exactly. And I think that's really at the heart of this whole integrated approach to safety. It's not just about compliance or ticking boxes.
It's about creating a workplace where everyone feels valued, respected, and protected.
Well said.
So they can go home at the end of the day feeling safe and healthy, both physically and mentally.
Exactly. And this report from Cool Water Cyber, I think it's a real wake-up call for the construction industry. It's time to start thinking about safety in this new, more holistic way.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, I highly recommend checking out the full report. It's full of practical advice and real-world examples that you can use to start implementing these ideas in your own organizations.
It's a great resource.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode of Business Leader Cyber Briefing. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.